What even is Isao Shinomiya's game plan rocking up on Kaiju number 8 like that? Because it's not what he says it is. Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take a look at Kaiju number 8, the big fight between Isao Shinomiya and Kaiju number 8 so far. This will give you spoilers through episode 11 of the anime and chapter 35-ish of the manga. Now, for anime only, I'm not going to give any spoilers for anything that you couldn't have seen in the anime up till now. These were actually my thoughts at the time when the manga released, so there will be no spoilers from further ahead in the manga. This is only up to episode 11 of the anime. And my question is, what actually is Director General Isao Shinomiya's goal? Because it's not simply just to take out Kaiju number 8 as quickly as possible. If that was his goal, he wouldn't have just walked into that room with Kafka, deliberately had Kafka unshackled, shown Kafka that he was perfectly willing to do violence by shooting Kafka repeatedly with the gun, punched Kafka in the chest to draw blood, and in short, showing Kafka again and again that he's willing to do violence. Then slowly takes his weapons out of their cases, turns his weapons on, says, uses his fist to show, this is my kaiju punching weapon, with which I am going to punch you, basically giving Kafka all of the information that he reasonably could so that Kafka would survive this fight. Then, as you can see, even during the fight in the anime, the Director General takes a less powerful blow than we see that he can, kind of giving Kafka as Kaiju number 8 a chance to warm up, to dodge, to learn his combat patterns. So what is the Director General's game here? Well, some of it might purely be tactical. The scientists clearly want to know more about Kafka. Fair enough, Kafka wants to know more about this whole kaiju thing. And if you go back to the scene where Kafka had just returned to Kikoru after fighting Kaiju number 9 for the first time, just after Kafka has rescued Rino and Iharu. He staggers up to Kikoru, and you can hear over the radio chatter that limb collection failed because the limbs had dissipated. This was no doubt referring to all of Kaiju number 8's limbs that Vice Captain Hoshina chopped off in the fight that had fallen off. Naturally, the Defense Force would want to collect those for study, but they couldn't because they dissipated. To dissipate basically means the same as to evaporate, to disappear. So Kaiju number 8's tissues, once they are disconnected from Kaiju number 8's body, just disappear. If they're not connected by connective tissue to the body, they're no good for analysis. So they needed tissue that could be collected. And the fact that the best evidence they had that he was a kaiju was that x-ray of his heart shows that there's nothing in his blood that would indicate it. Because you can bet if the Director General had a better piece of evidence to hand Kikoru than an x-ray, he would have given it to her. Probably the core itself, which is hiding inside his heart, refracts the x-rays differently than actual heart tissue would, but if that was the best piece of evidence they had, there was almost certainly no blood work. So they wanted blood in a transformed state. Blood is a connective tissue, meaning that any kaiju tissue that would be in Kafka's body would be preserved by the blood. So they needed a half-transformed blood sample. Now, they could have just asked him for this, but at this point, they really aren't giving him that much trust, logically. So the Director General walks into the room, shoots Kafka to get him to transform, and sees that he transforms as the blows impact his arm, and then the Director General just powers forward on raw speed alone, punches his fingers into Kafka's chest as close to the core as he can get, and draws blood. Blood that, in order to protect the core, must have been in a partially transformed state. So now you have kaiju tissue supported by the human tissue, so it won't dissipate. Then you see the Director General put that in a vial. Okay, so he couldn't just kill Kafka instantly because he needed to collect that living tissue sample first. Okay, but why the whole buildup? Why didn't the Director General put his gloves on, walk into the room, take the sample, and then immediately dispose of Kafka before he had a chance to fight. Again, let's go back to that scene with Kokoru and the Director General. At this point, we're all scared of the Director General. He is the one who is in charge of whether Kafka lives or dies, and it doesn't look too much like he's on the live side of things. And just from a purely logical, pragmatic perspective, this is a kaiju. They found a kaiju hiding in their midst as a human. Yeah, the defense force would probably be defended under they did nothing wrong, even if they decided to actually eliminate Kafka at this point, because of how suspicious that is. But when Kokoru goes to talk to him, clearly they have a strained relationship. But when her attempt to address him as an officer fails, when what she does is just try to repeat what Captain Ashiro has already done, she instinctively turns to him as her father. She says, "Daddy, I still want to believe in Kafka." And we don't see his response, but the fact that Kokoru, a 19-year-old, who as far as we have seen is very pragmatic and practical, the fact that she thought that would work could tell us something about the relationship and how, as she at least views her father. She thought that would tell with him. Then again, we have everything that Captain Ashiro has presented to him, and the testimony of how the 3rd Division is acting. All of Kafka's friends are fighting tooth and nail to get him out of this trouble. So from the Director General's perspective, he has these conflicting data points. On the one hand, this is a kaiju, there's a core there, and it appears to be hiding as a human. Has been hiding as a human and lying to the Defense Force for 3 months. On the other hand, as a military officer, he has the testimony of an entire division swearing up and down that this man has been nothing but a loyal and profoundly useful officer for those 3 months of service, something he's going to respect. He has his daughter's testimony that this is a man worth believing in. But then he has the rest of the board of the Defense Force who's telling him immediately dispose of him. He's a threat. I mean, the scientists was putting the idea of keeping Kafka alive, but everybody else had their thumbs down and were for disposing of him instantly. So what is the Director General going to do? Well, we see what he does do. He walks in, he lets Kafka know in no uncertain terms that Kafka is being treated as a kaiju. He shows Kafka that he is willing to do violence, and he gives Kafka time to warm up to partially transform to defend himself. Those are not the actions of either the warrior who's going in for the fastest, most efficient kill possible. In that case, he would have just taken Kafka out immediately after he got the blood sample. Instead, it seems like he's trying to deliberately learn something about Kafka. From the context of everything that the Director General has seen, he's probably seeing what Kafka's limits are, where the human ends and the kaiju begins. Testing Kafka is if Kafka can control himself when in a profoundly stressful situation, when his life is on the line. When the kaiju inside Kafka goes berserk, can Kafka rein it in, or does Kafka just become a feral animal? The only reason that the Director General would be doing that would be to see if Kafka is worth trusting and keeping him alive. Supporting all this is the fact that Kokoru was allowed in the observation room. She might be the Director General's daughter, but she is still just a rookie officer. The Director General would have had to deliberately make exceptions to have her in that observation room when this fight is going down. You can look at this as in 2 lights. One, the selfish light. The Director General wants her to see Kafka go completely berserk. So if the Director General has to put kaiju number 8 down, she saw with her own eyes that that was a monstrous kaiju that was being put down and not her friend. On the other hand, this could be the Director General wanting to give Kafka every chance, knowing that if one of his friends, one of his precious comrades, the brothers in arms from his division were there, it might put an extra restraint on Kafka and enable him to overcome the kaiju rage. Either way, as terrifying as the Director General is, and he is terrifying and remarkably thick in the anime compared to his body type in the manga, well, that's neither here nor there, it really does seem to be setting up that the Director General is giving Kafka every chance to prove himself, and to prove himself in a way that the board full of bloodthirsty bureaucrats won't be able to argue against it. If the Director General can say, look, he retained his humanity, his intelligence, even when I was pounding the snot out of him, that is, Kaiju number 2 was pounding the snot out of him, surely he'll be able to maintain his cool on the battlefield. Again, I very carefully restricted my speculation to only that which I recorded after reading the relevant chapters in the manga, so there's nothing in here that isn't available to the anime onlys as of episode 11. So, what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Is the Director General giving Kafka a chance to fight for his life here, or is the Director General just being very inefficient in his stated goal of seek and destroy? What you think in the comments below the video. I love to hear your feedback. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers.
Drake McCarty's leg was shattered, deep in the wilderness. As the flash flood closed over him, something alien pulled him from the waters. A military base that shouldn't exist. An ancient warrior with secrets of his own. Drake returns to his family with a whole leg and the burden of a secret he doesn't understand. In the forest around them, someone is watching, and something followed him home. Flying Sparks. 90,000 words of science fantasy adventure. The first novel in the Dying Embers universe is now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo by Rakuten, Google Play Books, and from the author as a signed copy. Get your copy now and step into a world where dragons walk the forest, aliens lurk on the mountain, and things go boomp in the night.
Escape into another world with the writings of author Betty Adams. Two worlds, one of utter absurdity, one of dramatic tension, both alike in aliens absolutely astounded by human behavior. Humans are weird, short, absurd science fiction stories. Flying sparks, dragons, aliens, and things that go boomp in the night.
Books available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo by Rakuten, Google Play Books, and at authorBettyAdams.com for a signed copy.